Yeah.
Okay, hello. I'm Joshua Hedgecock, a student at Cal State East Bay. On Friday, December 5th at 9 a.m., we are having our annual student conference presented by the Philosophy Society. Today, I'm interviewing one of our guest speakers, Dr. Magnus Eglander, and his bio is as follows. Magnus Eglander, PhD, is Associate Professor at the Malmo University in Sweden. His main research concerns the phenomenology of empathy and its application to professional work, pedagogy, and research. Ecklander is the editor of Phenomenology and the Social Content of Psychiatry and the co-editor of Empathy and Ethics, as well as the author of multiple articles in applied phenomenology. And thank you so much for being here with us. Many students, including myself, are trying to understand phenomenology and what it means to study lived experience. I'm excited to learn from your perspective and hear how it applies to psychology today.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Oh, of course. Thank you.
Yeah.
And our first question, what first got you interested in phenomenology and this way of looking at the human experience?
Well, actually, when I started college, I started with being having an interest in the humanities. So that's how it started. And then when I was going to pick a major, as
Yeah,
an undergraduate, I was thinking about, well, psychology seems interesting. So I picked psychology, but little did I know that psychology, in the sense of modern psychology, is not the psychology that's sort of like connected to the philosophy and humanities, but psychology in the sense of modern psychology is more of a natural science, right? So,
yeah,
well, I kept going in that sense because I thought that it's still maybe the psychology will show up somewhere. But it was more or less a lot of behaviorism and a lot of cognitive psychology. I mean, we did have some psychoanalysis and stuff like that also, but
yeah.
it was more or less psychology in the sense of a natural science. And I guess that most people getting into phenomenological psychology have that experience. So did actually my dissertation chair once. He would probably
Okay.
have a similar story that I have. So so it's interesting in that sense. But after a while, when I was about to get my PhD in psychology, I stumbled across the work of Amadeo Giorgi, who was the founder of American phenomenological psychology
Okay.
and the Duquesne University and that whole school that actually was all about phenomenological psychology and phenomenological philosophy. I mean, both departments was like that. And he had just actually moved to Saybrook University in San Francisco at that time. So I applied for that for my PhD at Saybrook and got into phenomenology. I'm sorry, my phone is ringing here. So and uh, what I did was, getting into phenomenology because that was more of a, closer to what I thought psychology was all about in that
Yeah.
sense. But little did I know that phenomenology is has an argument against psychologism, of course. So that also, is it's interesting because the relationship between psychology and phenomenology is very difficult in many ways.
Yeah.
But the story is that I was disappointed by modern psychology and with its naturalism in its base, so to speak, or its empirical logical theory of science, and more or less not getting into the mind of people at all. I mean, that was the whole idea from the beginning that I was interested in. So that's why. So yeah, so that's the basis of getting into that. It was to get out of what I was getting into. Yeah,
Yeah.
because it didn't
And our
really
next
match my
question,
expectations. So that's the
yeah,
problem. Yeah, yeah.
exactly.
Mm.
And my next question is phenomenology can sound intimidating when students first hear about it. How would you explain what phem- phenom- phenomenological psychology is in everyday language?
Yeah, it could sound intimidated in many sense, but a lot of things are intimidating. I mean, if you would do, you know, difficult mathematics, that would be intimidating too, right? So I mean, anything that's sort of like advanced in that sense, and it comes across as very advanced many times. I mean, phenomenology, considering the technical language of Edmund Husserl, I mean, it can sound very problematic, but in its I guess in its in a modest sense, it goes back to subjectivity, right? And to go back to subjectivity is also to realize that it's not supposed to be intimidating. You know, it's supposed to be we're supposed to be able to reflect on things and to reflect on the meaning of things. So I mean,
Yeah,
as long as you can relate to it, I think that's the best way of approaching anything. I mean, anything is intimidating in the beginning. I mean, just
yeah,
learning to play an instrument or whatever, you know, it's
exactly.
it's difficult. And it's hard to explain it in everyday language in many ways.
Yeah,
But and it's the same thing with anything that you are learning that are difficult and complex. You have to give it time. I mean, that's the only
yes,
thing I can say. So you get to know it. I mean, to get to know somebody, to get to know
yeah,
something, it takes
exactly.
time. I mean, and it's not and I don't think it's fair to any science or any type of philosophy to just have some sort of a here's a 5 minute version of what it is. I mean,
Exactly. Yeah.
because it's supposed to have depth. I mean, that's the whole idea.
That's the
So,
point. Yeah.
and how do you get depth? I mean, it takes time, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I want to say. But there is a difference between philological psychology and philological philosophy, and that's also important because I'm from the world of psychology, getting into
Yes.
phenomenology, and a lot of times people are, you know, like yourself, you said a philosophy major, right?
Yeah.
And you coming from philosophy and then to get to know, for example, applied phenomenology, like
Yeah.
phenomenological psychology. And there's a lot of differences here because there's a phenomenological psychology that Edmund Husserl writes about, and that's not the phenomenological psychology that I'm doing because this is completely different because I'm coming from the world of psychology into
Yeah.
phenomenology. So I'm using as coming from psychology, I'm using phenomenology to be able to ground myself, to have a better theory of science than modern psychology has of psychology. So that's the whole idea behind that. But if you are, for example, a philosopher and you want to do applied phenomenology, in the sense of interdisciplinary work with
Yeah.
any science. I mean, then of course that's a completely different story. I mean, it's a completely different way of approach. So anyhow, it's
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. And that puts me right into my next question. If a
Okay.
student wants to try phem- phenomenological study, what is the most important things they need to get right?
Well, I think what most people are doing wrong. I mean, it's a lot of people are using phenomenology in the sense of especially in the sciences, like in psychology, there has been a tradition of using the word phenomenology to just refer to the lived experience. And that's problematic because that's not what the whole idea is about.
Yeah.
So that's not what it's about. And a lot of psychologists did that. They talk about phenomenology, and that means like subjective experience of something, and that's problematic. So in terms of those who within the sciences who like to use phenomenology, I would consult a philosopher when it
Yeah.
comes to those technical issues uh, uh, concerning the philosophy and how it should be applied. So that's important also, one of those steps. But it's also thinking about phenomenology that you're studying a phenomenon. I mean, that's what
Yeah.
you're doing. So the first step, and this is what it suggests. I mean, in that sense, if you do it properly, from the perspective of the phenomenological psychology, where I'm coming from, is that you go to the philosophers and you look for the phenomenon, so you know the phenomenon,
Yeah.
and when you get a sense of the phenomenon, you can actually then you can go out in the world and, for example, interview people or do field work or whatever you want to do in that sense, uh, and study, for example, a situation which would be more like an
Yeah.
existential type of context in that sense, and that's good in the sense, but you can never forget your phenomenon, because if you don't have your phenomenon with you, I mean, you're just studying the lived experience, and then doing the same problematic mistake as most psychologists would do, referring to phenomenology who are not into phenomenology. So that's one of the things. And when it comes to philosophers getting into a study, and perhaps wanting to do applied phenomenology, which is very popular today, right? There is another approach there, but it's similar in that sense. You have to get to know your phenomenon, or perhaps you look for existential structures or existentials, and you can, what they call it, front load it to qualitative research, and do that instead. But I think both of those approaches could be combined. So I don't think
Yeah.
one is sort of like better than the other, but mostly there is a debate going on between applied phenomenology coming from psychology and one coming
Yeah.
from philosophy, and I think that debate could be easily, resolved in the sense that most psychologists are using phenomenology to get a sense of how to analyze things, and
Yeah.
philosophers are using phenomenology and applied phenomenology to sort of like for research design. And I think that could be combined. I mean, that's
Yeah.
not a
They can
problem.
definitely
Yeah,
answer.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's not a problem. So I mean, but they making a debate out of it because it's academia, right?
Exactly.
We're supposed to debate things, right? Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And what is your hope for the next generation of students and researchers will do with this phenomenological psychology?
Well, I'm hoping that it will continue. I think that's the problem today, because a lot of times, and it's not sort of like, and that they keep doing the work. I mean, it's not a quick fix. I mean, that's once again, you have to do the work, and you have to sort of like get into depth of things. I mean, and
Yeah.
to realize that it takes time. I mean, a lot of schools nowadays, you have to write your thesis within a certain amount of time, and that time frame within certain universities are sort of like designed already to do something really quick, right? And it's designed more or less to do a quantitative study. I mean, to do qualitative work, for example, like phenological psychologists are doing, that takes time. I mean, you have to
Yeah.
dwell with the data, what we call it data still, we're not positivists, but we
Yes.
call we call it data. You can call it qualitative material also, but it's you have to dwell with it, so you get to know it really well. I mean, that takes time, and you can't do that quickly. So I hope people won't give up. I mean, because everybody wants, a quick fix, right?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. And as one of our guest speakers for our conference, can you give us a little teaser on what you're going to be talking about?
Yes, I can. Hopefully.
Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. My study's been for the last 25 years or so in the realms of empathy. That's my, and I've developed also a training how to reflect on your empathy. Because
Okay.
in phenomenology, empathy is already there when you're in the presence of the lived body of another, or a human expression, or a minded creature, but in the sense of it's there. So I've developed a training that you can reflect on that. And that has helped a lot of professionals to be able to reflect on their empathy, also develop a spontaneous reflection of the empathy also. And that's include, people in the human services sector or whatever. And
Yeah.
also qualitative researchers doing interviews. But when having done that, I mean, you know, you look for new phenomenon that could be interesting also, right?
Yeah,
And that's sort of like also when you are engaged in a communication situation with another person, you also communicate something to the other. You do understand something coming from the other person as in empathy, and then of course you're supposed to reflect on, what was I just present to? And that could be spontaneous, instant reflection in that
yeah,
sense, right? And so it's not like a reflection where you lose the present moment, but it's a reflection. And then of course you have to describe to the other person what you understand. And hopefully that describing to the other person what you are understanding that the other person is going through based on the meaning of
yeah,
their expression, following their meaning of the expression. So that reply is sort of like also providing a sense of validation for the other person. At least that's the intention in that sense, right? The
yes.
other person feel validated, right? So I was thinking maybe that's also interesting, right? So
Oh,
I'm supposed to talk about tomorrow. I will talk about validation as an existential, actually.
yeah,
And what is a valid? So what is validation? How is that essential for the human being and for our existence and all those things? And considering the time that we live in, everybody needs to
yeah,
get
it's true.
validated, right? And you're thinking, well, that's just, yeah, that might be just something very shallow, it's just I just want to be validated, but it's not. And that's what I will show tomorrow, hopefully. I mean, it's actually part of a book that Susie Farello, as we know her, is gonna. So it's a chapter that I actually submitted to a handbook that she has on the phenomenology of bioethics. So I will present
Yeah.
that chapter tomorrow, and it's not out
Okay.
yet. So yeah, so maybe that's a
Okay. And I know
good
you guys
teaser.
also, yeah, you guys
Yeah.
also co-edited a book on empathy and phenomenology.
Empathy and ethics. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. The
empathy and
one you
ethics.
mentioned. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah. So,
Okay. And
so
then,
this is so I have a chapter in her book on the phenomenology of
okay.
bioethics. Yeah. So that's the chapter I'm going to focus on tomorrow. So that's
Okie
it's yeah,
dokie.
yeah. So it's called validation as an existential. So hopefully we'll get to know
Okay.
it. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can't wait to get the rest of it. And the last question is, what is the meaning of life?
The meaning of life. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, what is the meaning of life? That's always, I think I answered that question once when Susie actually asked me that question in another interview. So,
Okay, so now you know what.
but I still don't know what I said. And it's difficult to answer that question, but it's also to have some sort of a, in a sense, how can you answer that? I mean, it's difficult. It's
Yeah,
I would say it's to be validated and be part of a community.
and I think that's a great answer.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's it for me. If there's anything else you would want to include or let our listeners know,
No, I think that's fine. Yeah,
okay.
yeah, yeah.
And I
Oh,
thank you so
great.
much.
That was quick. Yeah, we
I
got through all the
know.
questions. Yeah.
Well, it's just a little teaser to help promote our conference. So,
No, that's fantastic. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
And I
All
look
right.
forward to hearing about more about your paper on Friday.
All right.
Okay. Thank you so
Okay.
much. Okay.
Thank you so
Take care.
much, Joshua. Thanks.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.